Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wholesale Change, the webcast and podcast from Distribution Strategy Group, where we offer thought leadership for wholesale change agents like you. Because if you're on this show, you probably are a wholesale change agent. My name's Ian Hellett. I'll be your co-host today, along with my business partner. He's the captain of cash flow and the doctor of distribution, Jonathan Bine, PhD. Jonathan, how are you today?
It's flowing pretty freely today, isn't it, Ian?
Well, we've got a great show today. We're welcoming Brent Grover. Brent, how are you today, my friend?
I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Good. Well, thank you for joining us. We're going to do a couple of commercials here before we get started because we have to thank our sponsors, and then we'll go through Brent's resume. But first, we want to thank Oracle NetSuite for their support. For more than 20 years, Oracle NetSuite has helped organizations grow, scale, and adapt to unpredictable change with a unified true cloud platform. They especially enable fast-growing wholesale distribution companies to achieve operational excellence, manage margin and inventory, and support and expand their geographical footprint for years to come. NetSuite provides an integrated system that includes financials, ERP, HR management software, CRM, professional services automation, and omni-channel commerce. Most notable, though, is their demand planning and advanced inventory management. Used by more than 28,000 customers in 215 countries and territories, they've worked with HVAC, electronics, electrical, furniture, home goods, and industrial supply and equipment companies, just to name a few. NetSuite is a true cloud solution that is the best fit for your wholesale distribution company. Go to netsuite.com for more information. Thank you, NetSuite, for your support. We also want to thank Cavallo for their ongoing support. Cavallo is a distribution management solutions provider founded by an experienced distributor who spent 2 decades perfecting and optimizing a high-powered, user-friendly solution built for distributors. Cavallo offers a robust set of execution-based software that provides sales teams with critical customer information to speed up order processing with precise control over every order, including workflow automation, to ensure efficiency and accuracy across all your processes. You can also leverage Cavallo's state-of-the-art business intelligence platform to know in real time if an order is out of compliance or in jeopardy, and where you can improve to power your company's next big moves. Cavallo's data-driven approach has created the best-case scenario for modern distributors, software that meets you where you're at, with flexible on-premise and cloud options that empower users to take their next technological step at their own pace, no matter where they are in their technical journey. It's time to take control over your distribution business with software built for distributors without adding a new ERP. For more information on how to experience accelerated growth with Cavallo's business intelligence platform and its distribution management software, visit cavallo.com today. So now, Brent, let's go through your background, my friend. You've been doing the same thing for a long time. You are a wizard at this stuff by now, I think.
Ian, if you're calling me the doctor, and that's a big if, but if I am the doctor, Brent is the dean. I mean,
he's the dean?
He is the dean. There's just no question about this. That is terminology I have used before you started laying it on thick about my background.
Well, Brent, be old enough, people call you the dean, I guess.
Well, you're an NAW Fellow, and you've been an NAW Fellow for 18 years now. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Supply Chain Equity Partners, Peace and Associates, I assume you pronounce it, with the NAW Institute for Distribution Excellence, and at your own company, Brent Grover and Company.
Oh, thanks for asking. Okay. I sometimes introduce myself as a recovering accountant because I started out there way back when, and I've relied on my, let's say, accounting background over the years because I've always had the financial orientation towards distribution. But I also say I'm a recovering distributor because I worked in the distribution industry for over 20 years at a successful company. It was a family business. My brother and I actually owned the business and sold it to a private equity company. So that was over 20 years ago. So gotten very involved in the consulting world, mostly helping companies build up their value and ultimately work on the exit strategy, selling companies, helping in an advisory capacity. I also have a relationship with a large accounting firm called Peace and Associates, which you mentioned, where I'm an advisor. I was actually a partner there at one time, And Supply Chain Equity Partners is a private equity fund that's based in Tampa, Florida. And I was on their original investment group, and I'm still an advisory board member there.
Yeah, that's Jim Miller's company, right? He's part of that.
Right. Near Gabrielli, Jay Grayson.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Those guys know what they're doing.
They
Yeah.
do.
Great. And in terms of education, you've got 2 fine schools on your resume. Northwestern, which of course is the world's finest school. I say
Not when I went there, but now it is.
I say that without any bias at all, just because I went there.
Causation or correlation, Brent?
I beg your pardon?
Causation or correlation? Now it's the great
Correlation.
correlation.
And Case Western Reserve, Weatherhead School of Management. You actually teach there as an adjunct, right?
I taught there for a very long time, and different courses over the years, but I started out in accounting, believe it or not. So I taught the whole accounting curriculum, but more recently I did coursework, taught other courses, non-accounting.
Great. And last question before we start to get into the meat of today's conversation, Brent, how many deals do you think you've been a part of, whatever that means?
That I'd have to include companies that I've served as a board of directors member, which is quite a few in wholesale distribution. I almost lost count, 12 or 14 companies I'm still serving on some boards. Those are mostly boards of directors, some advisory boards. They're pretty much the same thing. But the point is that most of those companies were acquisitive and we were buying companies. So I was very much involved with them in those deals. So counting them, and since I started just doing consulting work, a lot of sale transactions, I have a few in mind that in the very recent past, of course, it's been a very active time for transactions, which is one of the reasons we're here together today. But I would also say that as an advisory board member at Supply Chain Equity Partners for a lot of years, we look at 100 to 200 deals a year. That we don't buy them all, but we buy 1 or 2 or 3 and sell 1 or 2 or 3 every year. So there's a lot of activity.
So you've been on both the buy and the sell side as a result of
very much
all of this, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So you've been in part of dozens or hundreds, looked at hundreds, maybe thousands of deals.
Well, I don't remember them all clearly, but there
I don't know my home phone number, Brent, so I can, I'm sure you're better at that than I am. But so I know there are various opinions about what's going to happen with economic activity this year, what's going to happen with deal flow. You've got some views about, sort of valuation this year. Have we peaked? Are we past the peak? Is the peak ahead of us? What do you see coming up, Brent? Oh, and sorry, please ask questions. This is a very limited opportunity to have access to a true M&A expert in distribution. So don't hold back if you're on the line. Go ahead, Brent.
Okay, thanks. Okay, question covers a few things, so I'll try to address each one of them. The market last year, 2021, it was on fire. It was a bull run, really, for wholesale distribution companies. Every record possible was set. Number of transactions and so on. But the real point I think of interest to distributors is who were those buyers and what were those deals looking like? And the fact is that more than half of the purchases in 21 were by private equity funds. Now, those companies, the buyers may have been, let's say, platform companies of private equity funds, or they may be private equity funds buying platforms. But last year, there were fewer platforms being bought and more add-ons. Somebody said, I think it was Jim Miller, actually, it was the year of add-ons last year. So lots of PE funds were buying fewer than half the deals, maybe more like 40+% were strategic buyers making those transactions. So I would say looking at 21, it can't get any better than this. I don't think it can get any better than this, and the private equity funds still have lots of what they call dry powder. Billions of additional dollars were invested in private equity funds last year, and those companies are paid to deploy that money. And it's also a fair statement, the strategic buyers out there in wholesale distribution, they have very, very deep pockets right now. Their cash boxes are full. COVID has affected all of this, obviously, because it was an accelerator for a lot of things. I think it was an accelerator for acquisition activity, and to that extent, it still is. it was an accelerator for digital. Jonathan could talk for days on that subject. And since you said that Jonathan is what'd you say about cash? The Sultan of
He's the
cash?
captain of cash flow, I called him.
Cash captain. Okay. Well, if you're in Washington, you could be a what are they? Are they the Commodores now? What's their team called?
Commanders.
Commanders.
Commander of cash. So
Yeah.
cash flow has been fantastic for distributors. Most of them have never had this much cash. And one of the reasons is that, of course, a lot of receivables and inventories were turned into cash during the 2020 period when business wasn't so good. Ironically, for distributors, when business isn't so good, cash is usually good because
Right.
their current assets, revert to cash. But also the government money that came in, those loans that were forgiven, added a lot of cash. So the question is, how long will that last? Are we on the downslope? And now I would say yes. How long will it take to get to the bottom of the hill? Everybody's guess is different on that. But looking ahead to 2022, I don't think this is all sustainable.
But
I
when, you
would
say,
s-
when you say you don't think it's sustainable, you mean the prices that people are getting. But what about the number of deals?
I don't think that's sustainable either.
Okay.
I think, one of the things that sparked activity last year was privately owned companies, which is really, when I talk about M&A distribution, I'm talking about privately owned sellers, just to be clear. I'm not talking about Granger or Fastenal or even Lawson Products, which you guys talked about last week. Talking about privately owned sellers. Most of them are family-owned businesses. ESOPs don't sell very often. That's a complicated. They're great buyers. In fact, I think we call them Uber buyers in some circles, but they're great buyers. They're not very good sellers. ESOPs. It's a hard job to sell an ESOP. So, privately held businesses owned by, the prototype would be a wealthy family owns a business, and entrepreneurial leader is a family member. Most often, those companies, an owner is the leader of the company, or the leadership group is the family that owns the business. Something that happened last year is that Senator Sanders last April gave a lot of private business owners the heebie-jeebies, because he said, "Oh, I got something for you folks. We're gonna raise these capital gains tax on the sale from 20% to 39.6." Now, you don't need a slide rule to figure out that's that's double. And also, there's a 3.8% Americans ACA tax or Obamacare tax or whatever you want to call it. I want to avoid politics if at all possible, but that's a 3.8% surtax. It generally doesn't apply when a privately owned business is sold by the family that owns it and works in it. I'm not here to give tax advice, but so the standard long-term capital gains rate that people were accustomed to is 20%. So somebody comes along and says 39.6 plus 3.8 plus people who live in high tax states. I mean, after all, I think only 7 states don't have an income tax. So high tax states, California, Connecticut, New Jersey, California, those sellers were going to also get hit with a state income tax, in some cases over 10%, that is not deductible from federal taxes. So starting last May, a lot of people called, owners of businesses called up their friendly advisors and said, "Help me out here. Can I get this business sold this year?" And of course, one of the questions was, well, we don't know if they change the taxes, when it'll be in effect, will it be retroactive? All kinds of things, balls up in the air, and without even mentioning the estate tax, which for some families, where that wasn't going to kick in till around $22 million, it was now going to kick in around 11 million. And the rate was going to go up to 45%. And I'm sorry if I'm talking like an accountant.
No, I tell you, it's all very close to home. Now, this
Yeah.
is a little bit different, but I was in my last corporate job. I had stock options, and when I cashed them in,
Yeah.
the combined federal and state tax rate was 46%.
Okay.
So this this amount of money I got was reduced almost by half. And I think it's really important when you are, whether you're selling, you're cashing in options or you're working in private equity, you got to take these taxes into account and try to anticipate if those tax rates and laws are going to change. It seems to me that they're not likely to change at this point. I guess nobody really knows, but Sanders doesn't have any momentum politically. And again, I'm not trying to discuss politics. I'm trying to put this in the framework of tax policy, right? But were you going there to say that fear of taxes going up was part of what was driving the deal flow?
Oh yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. And I would also say that this is not a political statement because it's already the law. The estate tax changes that were passed a number of years ago that were tax relief for wealthy families, there's a sunset provision on them in 2025. So if Congress doesn't act, those changes are going to happen anyway. So,
Right.
that compounding the federal income taxes and the state income taxes, which are currently not deductible.
Right.
And you recall there was some conversation that they were going to become deductible again,
Right.
but that didn't happen. So, you figure out who's going to control Congress and the White House in the next few years, and maybe you'll have a better answer. Nobody really knows what the taxes are going to be, but it sure raised everybody's flag on that.
Yeah. So we have a question from the audience. Do you see any interest in American distributors or PE funds investing in or acquiring distributors based in Mexico?
It's an interesting question because a Mexican company has been a very active acquirer of distributors. FEMSA, FEMSA, based in Mexico, has been actively acquiring. In fact, I was involved in a transaction where we sold a distributor to FEMSA, and they've bought quite a few. So buying companies in Mexico, I am not by any stretch of the imagination an expert on cross-border transactions.
Right.
There are a lot of macro and microeconomic factors that affect Mexico that I really am not conversant on. So my answer would have to be, I don't know. But it is interesting to see a Mexican company becoming a serious acquirer of companies in the U.S.
Yeah, they're really one of, I think, 3 companies that are driving consolidation in the Jansan sector.
That's right. Their name is Envoy Solutions. Yeah, their company that's making the acquisitions.
Right. Right. Yeah. But I don't hear anybody looking at deals in Mexico for what it's worth. I'm not plugged in like you are, Brent, but that's not on my radar screen at all.
Nor is it on mine.
Yeah.
So Brent, let's talk about the macro and microeconomic factors that are affecting acquisitions and distribution.
Well, I love macroeconomics, so I'll try to keep this concise.
Don't try. Just tell us everything.
First of all, the U.S. debt and fiscal situation that we find ourselves in, to me, is dire straits. And we could get into, speaking of causality, we could get into that and why is this happening? But the real big question is how we're going to get out of it. The nominal GDP growth this past year was 11.7%. We think, until they revise it, they always revise that. But I think there's a lot of premature celebration going on overall because, politicians will tell us, that's their responsibility because it's a good thing, right? 11.7 GDP growth. Of course, the question is compared to what? Compared to a year that was way down. I would rather compare it to before COVID and how we're doing, and also bake into the expectations of what 2020 would have been like and what 2021 would have been like under more normal circumstances. So the 11.7% doesn't blow me out of my chair. However, wholesale distribution overall growth rate in 2021 was 7.5%. Biggest I've ever seen. I've been in the business for 40 years. Well, why is that, do you think? How much of it was inflation? How much is it based on what the comparisons are? And again, premature celebration. I think we're looking at something that's not sustainable, in my view. Industrial Supply Management or institution, was it for supply? ISM, I forget what it stands for. They've turned into their index is recessionary right now. I think we've gone from we have a glut right now of demand, and we have a shortage of product. So, I don't know if that's going to become disinflation, or if the 7.5% inflation we're experiencing is transitory or not. Look at the LA port volumes, how much of the product comes into this country. A lot of distributors are certainly very painfully aware of this. The port volumes in LA are down 16%. That's Long Beach and Los Angeles. The federal funds rate, it's rising. The long bond rate went up to 2%, right? Like, holy Toledo, it's been a long time since it was there. What if the federal funds rate goes to 3%? That's kind of more normal. Then we'll be back to 5 or 6% interest rates. Distributors have had a holiday from that for several years. Will the Fed tighten us into a recession? Growth outside the United States is decelerating. Is that enough, John?
Yeah, well, so I think those are great. Those are all important factors, and I think I hear different opinions.
Sure.
From what did Harry Truman say? I want a one-armed economist because all the economists I have say on the one hand this, on the one hand that, right? So you get a lot of different views, and but I think to bring it back to distributors specifically, it sounds like what I'm drawing from this, and you can tell me if this is right or wrong, Brent. If I owned a distribution company right now and I had an interest in selling in the next few years, I'd be trying to sell now, because in your view, valuations are not going to get higher for the most part for the next few years.
I don't believe they will. I think that sums it up well. If I had a company to sell right now, I would have already sold it, or I would be actively working on that now, because you can't underestimate the fact it takes a while for a well-managed sale to happen. It doesn't happen overnight. People sometimes ask, well, how long does it take? Can I do it in 6 months? Yeah, you can. It gets done in 6 months all the time. If the ball's already on the tee,
right?
If you're starting out there and you're going to start looking for buyers 9 months or a year, and how long does it take to build a house? It takes a while. So I would say, we're on a roller coaster. That's, to me, I'm kind of bearish about this, but I think we're at the top of the hill. And we won't go further up. How long will it take for it to start going down? And how rapidly will it decline?
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of risks in waiting, put it that way.
Okay, so a lot of distributors they made a lot more money this year because of, they just had a lot of inflation coming in, and so they adjusted their inventory values and, or increased prices as a result. And so this person has a question related to that, which is, how do you see pandemic supply chain issues and the resulting commodity price changes and now inflation impacting M&A activity in 2022? Are sellers' financials artificially inflated by the inflation rat, I guess, going through the snake?
Okay, good one. I think a lot of the answer to that question has to do with pricing power. Distributors who have pricing power don't really have much of fear from rising prices of their products. I mean, commodity price, we don't have any control over copper and steel. And, if you're an electrical distributor, copper is really important to you. And if you're in packaging, plastic resin is really important to you. And if you're not in packaging, you don't know that it went up over 50% last year, 50%. So if you have pricing power, you can pass it on to your customers. And, this gets into the distribution strategy group's area of expertise is, who has pricing power, who has a truly distinctive value proposition that's not easily copied, that's highly valued by customers, and that's what pricing power is, not to mention the skill of the salespeople, many of whom have never sold in an inflationary environment before, and some managers who don't know what this is all about either. So is the is the inflation transitory? Well, it really matters if you have no pricing power. Then you got to worry about it, because if you have a 7.5% increase in prices from your supplier, I am really pleasantly surprised to see a client that recovers 80% of that, because they don't raise prices the full amount with all their customers, and they don't do it as quickly as they should. And they let the salespeople convince them that, oh, if I raise the pricing, I'm going to lose this customer, or we're going to get caught speeding because when the cost went down, we didn't pass along the decreases. Yeah, but that's what your margin is now. So if you aren't diligent about keeping up the price increases, you're going to go backwards. Your margin is going to go backwards. So, I think there are reasons to believe the growth rate's going to slow. I don't believe the growth rate. I already said why. Then the labor crisis. How quickly is that going to go away? And I don't believe that the increases we are giving to employees are going to be, ongoing. But I don't believe we're not going to claw that back. We're not going to go to our employees and say, well, we raised the warehouse rates from $12 to $17 an hour. We're going to go back to 12 now. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's happening. And be a good time to be a union organizer if people start doing things like that. So, I think, retail sales have been really strong, and I think that's making everybody feel pretty good. But we are not in the retail sales business. We have to deal with things like housing starts, which are slowing down, plant utilization, which has been falling off. And you might say, oh, that's because they can't get computer chips, so they can't get that. Yeah, but business confidence. Look at the purchasing management index, PMI. It's slipping. So these things tell me that. Do you think the container problems at the ports are going to go away quickly? The cost of a 40-foot container was $6,000 or $7,000 a year ago, and now it's $18,000 or $19,000. Mm-hmm. The chassis that are designed for intermodal to move those containers to their final destination, there's a shortage of those. There's a shortage of truck drivers. There's truck drivers, 10-hour day limitations. They're new. I'm not saying they're bad. They're new compared to years ago. And even the vaccine thing, look what happened on the Ambassador Bridge in Detroit. I can't believe these things are going to go away quickly.
Yeah, I had a funny experience just a couple of days ago. I was walking into a grocery store near where I live, and there was a Girl Scout cookies for sale. So a couple of moms there and a couple of young girls. And I walked up and I said, hey, do you guys have any gluten-free cookies? And one of the moms kind of shook her head and she said, nah, we're all out. We've been having supply chain issues. I was like, wow, the supply chain issues are getting so rampant, they've hit the Girl Scout
cookies. Yeah.
Yeah. So in this environment, really any environment, Brent, if you are trying to get a distribution company ready for sale, and I guess the corollary is if you're trying to buy a distribution company, what are the smart things to do to, I guess, get the best multiple, to raise eyebrows as little as possible, because there aren't concerns about how you've been managing the company or the books. I mean, what are the factors you look for as a buyer, and what do you do to prepare as a seller?
Well, I used to say to groups when we talked about this, it's like selling your house. If you have a leaky basement, it doesn't matter how great the rest of your house is. A lot of buyers won't even look at it if there's a leaky basement. So you got to, the basics things. Do you have an IT system that works? Mm-hmm. That was sort of like obviously, are your receivables in decent shape? Are your inventory, you have a lot of old dead inventory in your warehouse. That's like staging your house. You want to stage your company, you don't have all that kind of stuff around. But it's gotten more complicated than that now, because like, hey, what's your digital strategy? What's that? Do you have a strategic plan? No. So how am I going to come up with a story for buyers about why your company would be a good investment for them if it wasn't a good investment for you? So, what about your management team? Are they all, they're all over 70? No, I don't have anything against people over 70, mind you, but myself.
Yeah, but they're not going to be around as long as people who are in their 40s in terms of running the company.
They're not in touch or they're not engaged. So that's all the usual stuff. Now, add to that, the phone call I love to get now is when somebody calls, and thankfully, this has happened a few times. Hey, you've been talking to me about having an exit strategy for years, an end game strategy. I think it's time now. And, can you help me? And of course, the answer is, well, I'd love to, if I can, or I'll find somebody who can. But why do you think this is a good time to sell? Well, it's a good time to sell because I don't want to own the company anymore. Now, that could be a biological reason, often the case. The owners are getting older. They don't feel like working 60 hours a week anymore. And I know running a distribution business takes a lot of time and it's hard. It's a lot harder now than it was. So they don't have the energy for that. The rest of their team may be getting a little tired. Their sales force is getting a little tired. The median age of a sales force in a lot of distributors, and I've asked this question a bunch of times, it's like 53 or 54 or 55. It used to be 42. What happened? Well, they kept getting older and we didn't hire anybody else. So they got, it increased by 10 or 12 years. A point being that just because you want to sell doesn't mean it's a great time to buy your business. But the thing that's different right now is it's a seller's market. So if you're going to sell, you want to sell into a seller's market. No question. And the only good time to sell your business is when somebody else wants to buy it. So why would somebody want to buy it? And, you could tick off the usual things. What's your value proposition? Is it distinctive? Is it easy to duplicate? What do your customers value about your company? Are they sticky? Can you demonstrate that with information? Let's look at 3 years trend on each of your sales territories on their customers and look at things like sales. And also don't forget margin and order size and other things that drive profitability, because a smart buyer is going to look at that. Buyers today are smarter than ever. And when you're selling to a private equity company, they are going to do a market study and they are going to do a quality of earnings analysis on your business. That's a much deeper analysis than you've ever done on your own business. So, it's a question, being prepared. I'm not trying to be intimidating, but what people want is EBITDA, which is a proxy for cash flow, and they want growth. And EBITDA and growth, plus the table stakes, which is I've got a functioning business here. I have to have everything functioning really well to be a platform company, because that means somebody's going to build a business on this platform. I have to have an IT operation that's sound. I have to have great purchasing people. I have to have solid people in finance and credit and every other aspect of the business. Otherwise, my business might be okay in most areas, but I've got some good customers and they're sticky, and I can sell my company as to a platform that's already owned by a private equity fund. And that could be a bolt-on acquisition. And they're not worth as much in terms of multiples, but they are valuable because, companies that are not making money are sold too. And they're sold sometimes at decent prices because they have the potential to make money in the hands of the new owner.
Yeah, we had a sorry, Jonathan, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, Brent, we talked about this in preparing for the show. I think that the landscape is sorting into three buckets. Those that have the potential to be platform companies.
Yeah.
Those that look like add-ons, and those that look like neither. And one of the things that's driving a lot of that's going to drive a lot of consolidation, is the need for digital transformation. And it's a too common number, meaning it's $1 million to several $1 million investment to do a full digital transformation. I don't just mean e-commerce, by the way. I mean, there's other things in digital transformation, right? And so that there's gonna be a lot of companies that are undercapitalized relative to being able to do that, that are not going to be platform companies, that will then either be add-ons, or if they're not interesting enough, neither. I'm curious if you could comment on that.
Yeah. Well, part of the buyer's investment thesis might be that this is a good company I'm looking at here, except they don't have the assets and the expertise to do a digital transformation. I do. And I can bring that to this company. Now, I don't want to pay the seller for that because they haven't done it yet.
Right.
That's definitely part of how I value that company is, I'm going to run some plays here with this company that this owner has not done yet. I'm going to do a customer profitability analysis study. I'm going to work on a detailed strategic plan for this company and look for opportunities for growth. I'm going to fix the things that are the gaps that are missing, the IT system and stuff like this. And it also might be, I'm going to do a strategic pricing project here because I think I could increase this margin by 200 or 300 basis points. I'm looking at their personnel productivity ratio, which is over 60, and I know I can drive it down to below 55, things like this. That goes into the valuation analysis. And ordinarily a buyer wouldn't want to pay for those things that they're going to do. Right. But in a real strong seller's market, they will share that upside with the seller. And it may not make sense to you at first blush, but consider this. In terms of valuation, a lot of it has to do with expectations. The seller's expectations for what the company's worth have nothing to do with what the company's worth. They have what they have to do with is how much money do they think they need to live nicely for the rest of their lives, to help their kids out, to make some donations to their church or whatever's important to them. They want to maintain their lifestyle for the rest of their lives. These are people who old enough to realize they're not going to live forever, right? So they're not going to take the proceeds and go out and buy another business. So what they're looking for, their expectations don't have anything to do with the market price. The market price, however, once the buyer knows what the expectations are of the seller, they may know that directly or indirectly, but once they know that, what they're going to try and do is to say, what things, if I bought this company, what things need to go right for me to pay that much for this business? And then they have to look at the likelihood of those things going right. So I said, these are smart people. So they're going to say, I got a bunch of things that I have a less than 50% of them going right, 50% chance. And in other words, I can't pay that much for this company. Although, every so often there's an exception where a strategic buyer just absolutely positively has to have that product line or that customer or something like that. Doesn't happen every day. And also a lot of it has to do with the size of the company, and I'm not necessarily even talking about their revenues, talking about their EBITDA.
Mm-hmm. So for the platform company, you're saying pricing could be one component. Pricing excellence, pricing expertise could be a component of the platform. Right. Could you talk about other things that might be a component of the platform?
Sure. Personnel productivity ratio, the ability of the people expenses, which for any distributor, the biggest chunk of for most distributors, not all, but for most, it's well over 50% of the gross margin dollars are people costs, including benefits and all that. So they're looking at the efficiency of the organization in terms of the number of people they need to get the job done and the compensation programs, particularly for the salespeople. Some distributors have a tendency to grossly overpay their salespeople, and then the buyers has the issue of how to make changes with that. But also order size, which is a big driver of profitability. You have to look under the covers a bit to understand what do these numbers mean at this company, and what under my ownership, what could I do? Now, frankly, sometimes the company's so perfect that a buyer might look at it and say, there's nothing I could do with this company. If I buy this company, maybe I could learn from them and make the rest of my company better. That's not out of the question, particularly if management is going to stay. But if all it's going to do is make the buyer's company bigger, depending on their investment thesis, that might be okay, because some buyers, since they're buying the companies, financial buyers, for the purpose of selling it to somebody else in 5 to 7 years,
right,
if I can get this, get out of the 2 to 5 or $5 to $10 million EBITDA range, if I can get it into the 20 range, I can get bigger multiples when I sell. And I'm going to scale this business that I bought up and sell it to a buyer who's going to be happy to pay me more because it's a bigger business. And that does happen.
So how much might the multiple go up as you go from those different stages?
Okay, I would say this then. This is just a general statement. That's not.
And it's about today, right? It could be different.
Yeah, no two are the same. But if the adjusted EBITDA of the company isn't at least $2 million, most buyers, financial buyers or strategic buyers, won't even look at it because the cost of doing a deal is significant. And if you're not getting a lot of upside from the deal, the expression people use is moving the needle. If it doesn't move the needle very much, and I have a lot of fixed costs in making a deal, the point is I could be using my people and my time to make other deals that would be more meaningful to my company. Again, that's a question of business strategy. So let's say at the 2 million level, there are a lot of buyers who would look at a company with a multiple of 4 to 6, I would say. 6 would be for a really great one, great company, 5 for more typical, and 4 for a company that needs a lot of work. Why? The risk factor is higher, right? Is at a 4 times multiple, you're looking at a 25% return, and at a 6 times multiple, you're looking at a 16 to 17% return. So you need more return if the risk is higher. That's pretty basic. If you get to the $5 million level, I think you could add another turn to those numbers and say, instead of 4, 5, 6, maybe 5, 6, 7. And if you're getting to the $10 million level, maybe add another turn there again, 6, 7, 8. And if you're in the plus 10 level of EBITDA, I had 2 transactions happen in the last 3 months that were over 11 times multiple of Addback adjusted forward looking EBITDA. And it's very important. What I just said is Addback adjusted means after adding back for all the stuff that the owner did with the business, they, their favorite charitable contributions and that they ran through the company, a lot of their travel, they added a lot of pleasure onto their business trips, and the company paid for everything, et cetera. So once you make those adjustments, and sometimes it's a salary for the selling people that's much higher than you would pay their replacements. So add back adjusted and then forward looking, you might say, well, last year we had that PPP money, so we have to make an adjustment for that because we're not going to get that again. But also, and last year we had a lot of profits from selling hand sanitizer, masks, and gloves at 40% margins. And barring another Omicron, hopefully, for all of our sake, we're not going to have that kind of stuff again. But then we also had other things that, we add back. We maybe had a credit loss that's non-recurring and so on. So you make the add back adjusted forward looking at a run rate for the last 12 months, not necessarily last year. People like to know, what about the trailing 12 months? Those multiples might be where I said, and the size of the EBITDA really makes a difference.
So Brent, we've got a few questions here, but I'll just make a comment. You mentioned the 11 multiple correlation or causation with your involvement. Yeah. I'm going to say causation. Let's go to the questions that we have. So we have a question with regard to selling to a private equity-backed firm. Are you seeing seller principals being given the opportunity to reinvest equity back into the platform company to share in the long-term success? So is it basically, yes. is it reinvestment, or is it a total cash deal? And do people have the chance to reinvest?
A lot of buyers would like to see the seller roll over 20% of the proceeds they got from the sale. They don't want the selling people to have control of the company going forward. The buyer bought it for a reason. They're going to be their company, but they would have the seller in there rolling over 20%. Could be 25, it could be 15, but 20 is a good number. 20%, so they have a meaningful stake in the company. That is to say, if they're going to be working there, that we may want them to roll over the money because we're a little tight on, we don't have quite enough equity money to make this deal happen, but that's not usually the case. It's really that we want you to have some skin in the game and co-invest with us because you and your team are going to be there too. And we want to all be on the same team. So the answer, Jonathan, to your question is yes, it happens all the time if the people are staying on.
Got it. If they're staying on, that makes sense. And then with regard to pricing power, we have a question from Jim. Did the shortages caused by the supply chain challenges give more people pricing power? For example, was it easy to sell products at higher prices when there were shortages?
No question. One of the great things that happened to me when I was in the paper business was there was a shortage of paper products at one time, and our margins, our typical margins were 25, and they were 30 or 35 for a while there. But it doesn't last though, because eventually the products, they're going to be back. So managing through a shortage is tricky business because you have to allocate product that you're short of to your customers and take care of them. And then you got other people's customers who are reaching out to you, and it's tempting to take their business at high margins. But when you do so, are you going to, first of all, take product away from your existing loyal customers? And second of all, are these customers that you're taking care of, they're somebody else's customers, are they going to stay with you? So yeah, so those are tough questions. So it depends how you manage that, Jonathan, but the opportunity is there. Some people call it profiteering, but nobody seemed to mind selling that hand sanitizer at 40% margins, which is normally not what it commanded.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
we have one question that's asking specifically about multiples in plumbing and HVAC. Is that any different than the multiples you already gave us based on EBITDA?
That's a very timely question because HVAC is up like 35%. And it's partly, is it weather related? I don't think so. I think it has a lot to do with products are in short supply, but there's a tremendous amount of demand generated by all these remodeling projects that are going on. And people wanted to buy, and hot water heaters have to be replaced every 7 years anyway, and all that. But it's been a great time to be in the HVAC business and the plumbing business. It's been a great time to be in the roofing business or the doors business. But housing starts now are, I think everything wants to revert to the norm, and we went through a period of time the last 10 years when housing starts were as low as 400,000. I'm talking about single family. And then the World War II average was like 1.5 million. Remember, before the housing bubble burst, we had 2.1 million housing starts. And then it crashed and it went below 1.5 million for years. If it's inflated now and we build more then demand and supply are out of whack, be a good time to sell that HVAC plumbing business.
Got it. Okay. And then last question that we have here, but then I've got one. Did transactions last year add back lost revenue caused by the pandemic?
Did the higher prices that sellers got kind of compensate them for what they lost during the pandemic?
I think the question is, if your business was impacted negatively by the pandemic, would a buyer, sort of add back that lost revenue and view it as an event rather than?
That's part of the negotiation process to say, look, the pandemic really hurt my business. This is not normal. And then, but you have to be able to back that up. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why people do quality of earnings studies is they want somebody to analyze the Addbacks.
Yeah. Sorry, Brent.
Yeah. No, if you already had an audited financial statement, they're probably not going to find anything wrong with those audited financial statements. Not too many auditors do what Trump's auditors did this week. Right. They said, "Oh, sorry, they were wrong." But they're usually right. If they were audited, especially. But you got to do an adjustment on the Addbacks. You've got to analyze the Addbacks and adjustments.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I want to go back to one thing you said earlier, which is about distributors proving that they can retain their customers when buyers are looking at them. When we work with distributors, Brent, very few of them even measure, like have a formal measurement for, number of customers and amount of revenue required versus number of customers and amount of revenue lost each year. And even if they have that measurement, they don't have like a goal for subsequent years and somebody who's responsible for it. It's almost like they're just not paying attention to this customer lifecycle stuff. But what I'm hearing you say is if a potential buyer is looking at your business, they're going to want to know how sticky those customers are.
Yeah, I think that, the board people use is granular. I like to get down to the sales territory level of the largest sales territories and the largest customers in each sales territory. I don't want to look at every customer in the company,
Right.
but I want to look at the prime sales territories and the prime customers in those sales territories and look at the trends.
Right.
And also understand, are we selling to the C-suite at that company? Are we selling to the plant manager, or are we just bidding on stuff?
Right.
Now, I want to know that if I'm the buyer, because what I'm buying is future cash flow,
Sure.
right? That's what I'm buying. I want to know within reason. I want to know what it's going to be if I can. Right.
So we do have another question in chat here. Where does a sell side banker bring value in the process? Do buyers appreciate their participation? And what's a reasonable fee? I'm not sure you can answer that last part, but
yeah. Okay. I think sell side assistance is critical. And before I blow the horn of advisors like me, I would say you need to have an attorney who's accustomed to doing transaction work of similar size and scope. A lot of attorneys out there say, oh yeah, my clients do deals, but that's not what they do every day. If it's not a firm that's big enough to have a full-time M&A person, I think you ought to find another firm that can help you out with that, or another lawyer at the firm you're already using. So that's one thing. Also, the accountant is very important. The lawyer keeps you out of trouble as far as risk. The accountant helps you get as much after-tax proceeds as you can. So you need a skilled accountant for that purpose, who's really a financial advisor. But then what role does the sell-side advisor take, which was the question. The role the person takes is, first of all, if you're going to run a process, which we could talk about that, I hope we have enough time. Okay. Running a process takes a seller's representative who has credibility, that when that envelope comes with a letter, a teaser about the company, that someone's going to open it, right? So that's part of it. But even if you're not running a process, you need someone who is going to be able to help you find the best buyer or buyers. In all likelihood, you already know who they are, because most people get enough phone calls and emails and letters that say, there are some people who've expressed an interest in my business. We need to vet them.
right.
And see, are these people who can definitely get the deal done? They have a track record of doing it, and not trying to manipulate the seller after the letter of intent is signed, and they always renegotiate the deals because they're not honorable people. So you have to vet the buyer. Sometimes the buyer you already know is the best buyer, may not pay you quite as much as somebody else, but they can do two things the other people can't do. They can see the deal through to conclusion, and they can do it quickly.
Great.
Time is the enemy of all deals. So if you're holding out for the highest price from a guy who's going to jerk you around and then later on drag their feet because they want to see how you're doing before they buy the business, that's not the person you want to sell to. And the additional money after you pay taxes and everything else on it is not worth it. So a good advisor can help you, but also the best possible situation. You find the buyer you really want, and you find at least one or two other interested people. Maybe one is enough. Two, you can negotiate the price up far more than the fee that the advisor will charge.
Right.
Now, as far as the fee is concerned, people will talk about the Lehman formula and the double the Lehman formula. And rather than explain all that, I'll tell you, it usually works out to, except on a really small deal, about 2 or 3% of the sell price of the company. When all the formulas and everything are taken into account, 2 or 3%, although in a very small deal, some investment advisors, or investment bankers, whatever you call them, they will say, my minimum fee is $250,000.
Got it.
So if it's a really small deal, that may work out to more than 2 or 3%, but that's a function of how small the deal is. But if you're not confident that that person got you at least that much more and more from the transaction and got it done. A lot of deals fall through at the last minute, and that person's got to be there to keep that deal alive. Things are going to happen. As I said a minute ago, time is the enemy of all deals, but also most good deals fall apart at least once during the negotiation process.
Right. Right. So one last question, I promise is the last one before we wrap up. Someone wants to know, do you see, looking into the future, do you see any particular consolidations happening? I mean, by industry, for example, you see more consolidation in some sectors than others potentially?
Look at the companies that are buying, and that will tell you. Blackhawk Industrial has bought a lot of small industrial supplies companies. U.S. Lumber has bought a lot of lumber companies, right? Look at the acquisitive people. Imperial Dade has bought a lot of Jansan and packaging distribution companies. FEMS has bought quite a few also. So if you look at any industry, what drives it is there an acquisitive buyer out there trying to build up their company for their own strategic reason, right? And the best situation is where there are two of those who compete because they both want to buy you. So the answer to your question is, yeah, the consolidation continues, but eventually, what are we going to have? 3 companies in every industry? And also everything will be an oligopoly. And the only thing that won't be consolidated is the shoe shine stands.
Great. Okay, good. Well, I know if I was selling a company, Brent, I'd be calling you. Really, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today.
Pleasure.
It's been fascinating, educational. I know the audience has enjoyed it. We've had a lot of questions. Brent's contact information is there in the middle of the slide for you podcast listeners. It is Brent@BrentGrover.com. That's Brent@BrentGrover.com. And you can reach me at iheller@distributionstrategy.com or Jonathan at jbein, JBEIN @distributionstrategy.com. We hope you'll join us on February 23rd. We have a great webinar. This is one of our biggies. We have surveyed thousands and thousands of distributors over the years and several hundred this year. This is this 2022 State of E-commerce Part 2. We do this every year. This one is brought to you by Bloomreach, Kiklo, Epicor, and Connexium, February 23rd at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. It'll be a great episode. You can go to distributionstrategy.com and click on events to join us. Brent, one more time, thank you, sir. You're a gentleman and a scholar, and we really appreciate you spending time with us. Jonathan, great working with you again today. Thank you to all of our everyone in the audience today. Thank you for your questions and your participation. We'll see you next time on the Wholesale Chain Show. Bye now.